Nigeria's perception of the 2020 manifesto policy of the NDC and MP. That is on one hand. Then we are also going to look at what we call Development Transparency Barometer Index. But this is one of the development indicators that we developed at our unit at ADRRI. We developed this and we launched that last year. And the essence of this was to ensure that at least we contribute our quota to policy dialogue, we contribute our quota to enhancing the debate on how governance can go on, looking at the point of view of research, and at the same time sifting through what citizenry are talking about as their aspiration, as they themselves as citizens, what they are supposed to do. So today's presentation is going to highlight two basic reports, which is very key to our national development. As I've already talked about, one that has to do with the recent political parties and their policies that they have talked about. And then the second one is a year-long tracking from January to date, what citizens have been reporting as far as development issues are concerned. And this will give us a sense of how well this is how the presentation is going to be like. We are first going to look at our introduction. We talk about the method, how we arrive at the perceptions that we have seen as far as about political manifesto promises. I want to highlight one particular point which is very important. A perception about a political party manifesto necessarily doesn't mean that a political party is below power. Perception here has to do with how citizens are thinking about and how they view the way you are able to explain your promises to them, for them to discern and understand, and then they make view up out of that. At the end of the day, you'll be able to tell that, okay, what I have told them, they actually understood what I want to say. So let me give an example. Assuming that I want to sell this to the public, how I convey the information to the public and how the public will view what I am selling will make them have an interest in what I want to say. And so, on one hand, we are just dissecting some areas of the political parties manifesto, because as a policy think tank, our core mandate is one, to look at issues about education. We're talking about access to education, and this has to do with research. Two, we'll have to look at how infrastructure is undertaken in the country, and we'll do research in those areas. Three, we can talk about climate change impact on agriculture. And so these thematic areas are what we have actually delved into, or they are the core responsibility that we've assigned ourselves to. Today, if we look at manifesto, what does it do to the agenda? Manifesto basically, what it tells the citizen is that this is a contractual relationship between myself as a political party and the citizenry. However, in our discourse as a country, most citizenry just take manifesto promises as just a mere activity that is being, or a mere showcase that is done by political parties. But however, it is supposed to be a contractual relationship that we will hold duty bearers accountable. Who are the duty bearers? We're talking about politicians, we're talking about political party leaders. And so if you actually take a political party manifesto, it is a contractual relationship. And that is how we vote, because when a political party tells you they're going to do A, B, C, D, and they're unable to do that, it means they're not going to retain them to power. So over the years, we have looked at these political parties, giving us their manifesto, talking about the various beautiful things that they want to do. This time around, we are zooming our lens to just these two political parties, NDC and MPP, because we want to look at policy effectiveness, and at the same time, we want to see how best, if each of these political parties wins power, how they can govern the state. That will be to the benefit of the country. And we are saying that this particular election will prove some surprises. Surprises in the sense that we have the high level politics, which sometimes are called the macro level politics, which sees through decisions that are taken by the party in general. They also have the lower level politics, which is done by the individual parliamentary candidates. This year, these things will play out because it depends on the perception about the candidate and how the candidate conveys his message that people actually buy into the idea of the political party. And at our level, as I said, we are dealing with these three major items. We are talking about education, infrastructure, and climate change impact on agriculture. And then these findings we think is going to be very compelling in the sense that it is explaining how each of these political parties is able to carry their message to the people. It is not saying the political party will win power. Please, let's take this message very clear. The information here tells to what magnitude that each and every political party is able to drum home their thinking, their values, their political party manifesto for an average person to understand. And so at the end of the day, what we are going to see is that we're going to see the perception of the people. And if the people perceive that you're able to drum home your views very well, it is left to them to take a decision. So we set off looking at when the political parties launched their manifesto. After the manifesto launch, we set off to do the second aspect of what we're doing. We started one which was face-to-face conversation, which started for some time. Then we also looked at the part which the political parties have developed the manifesto, what the people are going to see as far as their perception is concerned, and at the same time, as far as what they think is concerned. Then we have done substantially much, because if you look at our sample size here, we are using about 2,000, which is very much in terms of making decisions at the national level. We also came out with all those assistance techniques that we need to use. That will help us be able to shape the discourse that we want to do. Now let's see what happens. Here, generally we are looking at two basic results. How did these political parties come up with their manifesto? The manifesto, as I started by saying, that it's a contract. So if you want to produce a contract, how do you ensure that the one that you are having to have a contract with actually understands what you are doing? Here we asking about the coverage. How did they cover? How did they talk to the people? Did they do that? Did they have that ability to talk to the people? And so we are talking about 2020 manifesto coverage for both NDC and MPP. And if you take your time and you look at it very well, I am much very concerned, because if you look at the results here, those who are not consulted for each of the political parties, you realize that majority of the people, about 77% said they were not consulted when the people were doing their manifesto. It means that it's not that many of them were not consulted, it is that the consultation was done at the highest level. In other words, we're talking about interest groups, like UTAC, like TUTAC. It was done at that high level. But if you look at that of NDC, they were able to reach some sizable number of people in the Ghanaian populace who perhaps were not into those groups. And so if you look at the reporting, about 39% said they were consulted, whereas 13% said they were consulted by them. So this is about when they were drafting their manifesto, how they interacted with the people. Then let's go into what we actually wanted to do. We are talking about issues about education. What are the promises of education issues in NPP manifesto? What are the promises of education issues in NDC manifesto? If you take NPP for example, they talk about the fact that they want to increase the manpower, and then they needed to enhance the implementation of free SHS. Remember that free SHS has been one of the pivotal educational, let me say, revolution in our country. And so, free SHS itself is not what we are looking at now. It is already in existence. So now when the party is doing a manifesto, they are not looking at free SHS, they are looking at how to enable the free SHS to thrive very well. And so this is one of the enablers to drive the free SHS. Okay. Two, they are talking about students who get admission into the tertiary institution. At least you will not be denied access. They are talking about, in fact, putting in some amount of 219 million to enhancing quality in education. And the last one, they're talking about implementation of a comprehensive national policy, national teacher policy, and national digital literacy project for teachers. What is NDC saying as far as education is concerned? As part of their manifesto, they are talking about the fact that they want to expand their free SHS by including those who are in the private schools. Two, they want to abolish double track. Three, they want to pay 50% of students' fees. Then they want to pay, they want to give free tertiary education for people with disabilities. And the last one, to extend education access on legal education. Let's look at what has happened. So if you take this, increased manpower as provided by NP, you realize that we have about 32%. So please look at this place. You see that the color, strongly disagreeing, disagree, uncertain, agree, and strongly agree. So normally when you take the average of these two, you lump these two, agree and strongly disagree. So we realize that in terms of manpower, we have about 52%. If you take making sure that no students obtain admission and denied access, if you add this to this, you are getting some around 52.70 here. Implementing this to the same thing. But what is so worrisome here has to do with the uncertainty. Most of the respondents will tell you that they don't even know how this is going to play out. What it explains is that the party still has a lot of work to do. What they need to do is to drum home these particular policies that they want to as far as education is concerned. Let's look at what NDC is saying. They want to make private schools join free HSS. Remember that it's already the foundation is already laid because there is free HSS. So this is not a too big policy issue. It's just a matter of adding more to the expenditure that is already being expended. And so we have 32% here. And so cumulatively, we have 57. Now when it comes to abolition double track, this is not also this is also a policy that they can easily implement. And so we have 51%. If you add this, we have 73 of the perception as the people are putting across. Then we'll talk about absorbing free HSS. So, but what I want us to look at again, uncertain. People are uncertain. In other words, you need to look at the magnitude of those who are uncertain here, 7.2, and look at those who are uncertain here. It still boils down to political party coverage, how you talk to the people, and what you want them to do as far as the election is concerned. In other words, NPP still has to go back to the people. They must do door-to-door campaign, as NDC have done as far as their manifesto was concerned in the nation. Let's come to the next one. We are talking about. So this is the basic. Here tells the summary of all the figures that you saw. So in totality, you will see this to be 55.58 and 71.60. Remember, this is perception. Then we have another one in terms of infrastructure development. What are they saying? In the manifesto of the NPP, we are talking about building construction of 6 new regional hospitals in the 6 regions. They are talking about construction of 2 psychiatric hospitals and rebuilding the existing ones. They are talking about building low-income housing exits to addressing the housing deficit that we have in Ghana. Strengthening the capacity of the development authorities that they have done, at the same time the Zongo Fund. Then completing the Yendi Tamale Demo Water Project. These are the development in terms of infrastructure that they mentioned. NDC talks about the fact that they want to complete the Eastern Corridor route. They want to dualize Accra-Kumasi Highway. They want to provide residential facilities for all health workers. They want to provide district hospitals for all those districts with none. And then lastly, construction of roads in all local areas. These are infrastructure development that these two political parties have talked about. Let's look at what the citizens are talking about. Do they actually have? What is their perception regarding this? Construction of 6 new hospitals. We have about 63% of the citizens saying that the NPP are not going to do that. Construction of 2 more, we have about 60.20% saying that we will do that. Then we have strengthened the capacity of this. One of the things that we are looking at is that it looks as if, by their perception, the Zongo Fund is not seeing what is expected to do. So the government has to do a lot of work in this area. So even if more money is pumped in that sector, if you look at the other area, you realize that that is below. Then completing the Yendi Tamale Demongu water supply. You see what is happening here. There are some projects that are going on in that particular locality, which tells you that the people are very much confident that the government will do that for them. Because most of these projects have already been kickstarted. And if we are going to complete that, it's going to be one thing that we want to have. Then we'll have, in terms of completion of the Eastern Corridor route, look at this blue line. What is the blue telling us? Disagree. So, as part of what NDC says they want to do, the people, as in terms of their perception, they do not believe that the government will do that. And if you go into literature, if you go into reports, you realize that the Eastern Corridor road network has always been coming. And so the citizenry, based on their perception, they are believing that, or they think that this is going to be a mirage, but not a reality. However, when it comes to dualizing Accra Kumasi Highway, they believe that it is very doable and possible. The same thing applies to residential prevention facilities, providing district hospital and the rest. Remember that NBC has provided a lot of cheap campus, and so this has contributed to people having very high perception in terms of ranking for them. Then let's come back to, so if you take the totality, so you realize that in terms of infrastructure, it's very low as compared to education, which tells you that the hallmark of Ghana's development hinge on infrastructure. Look at the basis point there. The other one was 70 something. So you realize that we still have a lot to do as far as the infrastructure is concerned. And that is why this has played out that way. Let's look at climate change impact. Many countries resist the essence of climate change. And they are resisting it because of its impact on their productivity. Because if you want to zero in climate change, it means that you're going to reduce how much of what is produced by the manufacturing sector, looking at something we call the polluter-pays principle, and looking at other measures. Here, we want to see what Ghana is going to do, or what the political parties are talking about in terms of their ability to help us fight climate change. With respect to NDC, they're talking about including the youth in proposals planting for coastal protection. They're talking about empowering the water and sanitation sector for advancing agricultural growth. They're talking about establishing waste management funds to address problems with waste very low. Because NDC is coming in, even though this is not promising their manifesto, they're also talking about it. Because they want to cash in the zero areas where this has been very prominent. And that is why you see that it's very low as a perception score. They want to talk about increasing subsidy. You see that on agriculture, fertilizer, you see that NPP has done those things. And so you see that the perception among people is very high. It means that if they still drum more, they still talk about it to the constituents, they are likely to buy into. Then also reviving CSIR, which is one of the backbone helping fight climate change. And NDC talked about including youth in commerce planting. And now, most of the political party promises which we have always talked about is that people must try to include youth in their policy framework. And at the same time, their policy group. The moment the youth come into play, you begin to see the dimension in terms of politics changing a different trend. Then we can look at the empowering in that sector, then establishing waste treatment. And so we begin to see that at that particular level, majority of the people begin to believe that climate change is something that NDC is working on. This is their summary, and you can see the summary of the two in terms of the climate change. Now, this is where our focus for the year. This particular study was from January to date. Last year we launched our Barometer, trying to encourage communities to report their problems. And when we say Barometer, we're just trying to look at how the citizens will participate in national development. And so we want to measure that. And at our office, we try as much as possible to come up with our own form of measurement. That will help us be able to tell or contribute our quota in terms of national policy dialogue. In doing that, what we have looked at is to look at one, the effectiveness of each of these government agencies as far as at the same time general government performances. Effectiveness in the sense that I want to look at what the MMGAs are doing. If national government provides a particular policy which is not supported by MMGAs, there is likely going to be a failure. If MMGAs will provide a policy which invariable is not synced with national development, there's going to be a problem. And so each policy must always be intertwined. In other words, the policy must be one that is accommodating. And once policies are accommodating, we are expecting that the citizenry will report very well as far as their policy implementations are concerned. Now, I want us to take a very closer look at this, because this is going to be a first of its kind in Ghana and Africa. Our ratings are generated in-house at our organization. What we are saying is that if we want to measure general government, talking about the central government performances, we use this GA, GB, GC, GT, GP, GFN, and those who came for the Barometer the last time will understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, what we are saying is that if government performs very well at the highest level, we will be on the score that level. If government performs whatever marks you get, we are able to allocate this. And when we talk about ministries, we are talking about ministries performance. So we are singling out the ministries who are supposed to be the ones who are to provide us the enabler to allow us to do most of the things I want to do. The same applies to the departments, the same applies to the agencies, metropolitan assemblies, and then we also have district assemblies. And we didn't leave it there. We went further to also look at academia participation, performance, and development. We have people who are very knowledgeable and they are in academia. Because of tag of politics, you don't want to do that. And because of that, it is retarding our development. So we are saying that going forward, we want to measure the effectiveness of academic participation. How do we participate in nation building? How are we encouraging ourselves as academics to be able to build and help develop our country? Then we'll look at civil society activeness. Do we have freedom to operate as civil society? Have there been coercion from the central government? These things are very important. And the last one has to do with corruption frequency reporting in development issues. Here we're talking about daily corruption reporting. And as to how central government does it or local government performs in that area, we do that measurement. And these are our keys to our grading. So if you have 80 as an absolute score, we will say that it is excellent. It is resilient to the reversal of the governmental gains and strong institutions. In other words, if we provide an enabler, and that enabler is not going to be reversed to whatever situation it was before it got to the current state, you may get A. We are talking about B. B here is very good and resilient, and we still have we don't have structural deterioration. In other words, we have put in all the policies that is required. When once policies are put into place, there should also be institutional building, so that we can have a institutional memory being carried across, so that it is not Mr. A who is on the scene. Once he's gone, he goes with it. We are talking about institutional memory being provided. If it is C, we are talking about good and resilient, so that there will be some structural policy formulation, there will be structural building. Then if the person gets from 50 to 59, we are talking about fair with policy formulation. In other words, we have started to take off, and we've come up with our policy formulation. We have decided we started doing institutional capacity building and strengthening infrastructure building. Then 40 will give us an average stagnant policies and the institutional growth with misdirection and policy government. And then we have what we call fair or fail, which is below average. This is where we're talking about a situation where we have dictatorship. We see a DC or MC who will ask a question whether you have a local capacity in for using public expenditure. And these are some of the things that we're talking about. And so there will be a full blown of this report next year, mapping out each of these that we have talked about. Where we are unable to get a report, we will rate it not rated, which is NR. So for that period, we are going to, these are the variables that we are talking about. We have government, G, MI, these are illustrations to what I talked about initially, up to the last year. And then this is the report. And this particular report may influence this year's election. This particular report, because we are looking at how citizens have been reporting through our system. And when you go online, dtbi.adri.org, you will see that when they report, it is live. So at the end of the day, we are able to collate what they report, and then we pass it through the process that I just talked about, and we are able to give out the report. And so let's look at what has happened. So major developmental issues have been cataloged here. We are talking about developmental challenges reported. What have they reported? We are talking about open defecation, sanitation, poor road network. We are talking about media reported corruption, armed robbery, potable drinking water, street light. These are basic social amenities. And these social amenities are reasons why people vote. If I want to vote for political party A, my reason is that I want to be safe. I want to have good water to drink. And so, we also have another part called total reported score. And our barometer provides 100% for both initiative by the government to solve the problem or the district assembly to solve the problem, and at the same time, the total reported score. And so what we are doing is that we are going to score all these developmental challenges that they have mentioned. One, we are saying that for open defecation, 6% was the reported score. And then the ministries, the government, the central government, what they have done is that they responded about 22%, which shows efficiency. And look at the score here, 76.50. This tells you that Ghana, even at the national level, in terms of United Nations, if you look at our measurement in terms of open defecation, it has been going down. It is because of what we call government reforms. Once there are reforms, you see the score going up. Let's look at sanitation. From 14% as reported cases, most cities still have problems with sanitation. Then we have some initiatives about 50% of the total score. Then we have efficiency in terms of government reporting being 51.50. What it means is that the DPL, the Development Transparency Barometer Index score, is saying that the ministry is B. In other words, is very good. In the case of what? Open defecation. The ministry is this is D. Are you getting me? And I have already talked about D here. Look at it's when you have D, what is it? Fair. And so if you come here, in terms of sanitation, we have an impact here. We just not too good. It means that we still have a lot to do. So this is metropolitan, municipal, district assemblies. And then the problem is that the ministry in charge of that should work very hard. We have poor road networks, and we have 42.5%, which tells me that Ghana, one of our major problems, which we have always believed is poor road network. And we have always mentioned at our place, ADRRI, we have always talked about the fact that road has so many multiplier effects. When I use the word multiplier, we're talking about the number of impacts that if you have road in the country, that it will have on other sectors. For example, if we are able to construct major roads in Ghana, we will reduce cost of health, we will reduce food prices, we will reduce basic health hazards. That is just only roads. And so if any government is able to do roads, what it means is that the government is going to be reducing the burden, one in terms of food security, two in terms of health hazards. And so road was highly reported here, which is 42%, 42.5%. What initiatives have been taken? 21%. And look at government. This year, the government says it's what? The year of roads. And so you see that the percentage score has up. But these roads are not feeder roads. That's the problem. Please, I don't know whether I'm making sense.
Sure. Yeah.
The roads that are provided are not feeder roads. If they were to be feeder roads, I bet the percentage score would have gone past 76%. Because majority of the people who are complaining are in the hinterlands, and they are very bad roads. And so we are saying that the district assembly, the municipal assembly, the metropolitan assembly, and it has an impact on general government politically. We can talk about media reported corruption, 9.3, and then initiatives to solve that we have 4.5 according to perception. That's what the citizens are talking about. And government machinery providing an enabler, in other words, reform. Government reacting to providing reform to that is 41, which is key. Armed robbery, 9.5% of the total. Then we have effectiveness. In other words, here it's a very major challenge. The Interior Ministry has a very big challenge because policy has not actually signed in terms of armed robbery. How do we deal with armed robbery? When we have armed robbery, what they do is just to send the police. The question is, do we have a institutional framework that we wish to take or wish to undertake, so that at the end of the day, this is what we want to do and this is how we are doing it. It is very, very important. And so you realize that we're not doing very well in the case of armed robbery. And we are saying that the citizens really are questioning the minister. The minister should sit up, he should find a way for us to deal with it. Because if you look at DISEC or whatever, the district executive is always ahead. Among the score, look at the score of street lights. And the district executive must 16. They must be able to do something. So this is how our scores are done. You realize that we have total reported score is 100. We have initiative to solve the problem is 100. But you realize that here we didn't put anything there. I'll tell you what it means. Based on this, we are saying that we will develop something called cumulative development barometer index. Cumulative means we are lumping this, all of this. And at our unit, at ADRRI, what we have done is that we are saying that this, as a basket, gives us 500 basis points. This, all government reforms. So when government does any reform, when you total everything, it's more or less than when we compute inflation. There's always a basket of inflation. Okay, this good should be added, this good should be taken out. Looking at literature and how we have also visualized it, we say that when you total all of this, it should always give us 500 cumulative basis points. And so we are going to total this, and we find what we call our cumulative index. And so you can see that we are saying the overall cumulative index is 500 basis points. But the question is, what does it measure? This is the tail end of our presentation. What does this measure? We are saying that the Development Transparency Barometer Index is equals to government reforms, all reforms that are done by government for each of the problems that are reported by the people. How government is effective in dealing with that over our basis point, which is the DTBI in-house point, which is 500. And so when you add all of this, please permit me to go back. When you add all of these, okay, you are going to get this figure. And so when you divide this figure over this, we are going to get 0.723. What this means is that we are almost close to 1. Because based on that 500% rate, 500 over 500 will give us what? 1. Which means we are positively correlated, let's put it this way. And so once this is close to 1, this is almost close to 1, 0.7, tells us that the public confidence on the NGB government is very high. Looking at this, all of this, on this indexing here. So this is likely to influence this year's election. Because if you take each of the values that we have assigned as far as the developmental challenges are concerned, and you merge them and divide it by our housing that score, you get 0.72. If you get 500 here and divide it, it means that you are perfect, which will not be possible because people will raise this perception index. But however, the absolute value we have seen here tells us that despite all most of the challenges that we have reported, the citizens still believe that this particular government is very much communicating its policies to them. And so it may influence this year's election. Thank you very much.